The restaurant had long emptied of diners, the clatter of plates replaced by the low hum of refrigeration units and the distant echo of running water in the kitchen sink. I lingered at my desk, under the harsh glare of a single lamp, reconciling the day's receipts and transactions. Most nights, this was routine, almost meditative, a rhythm of numbers and logic that grounded me after long hours of orchestrating chaos in the kitchen. Tonight, though, a simple glance at the joint credit card statement threatened to unravel that calm. Scrolling down, a charge caught my eye. Client appreciation gift. My brow furrowed as I studied the amount. The digits alone felt obscene, far beyond any reasonable expense for a client, far beyond what Ben had ever spent in the name of business. I clicked the entry, cross-referencing it with the attached notes. Designer shoes. A luxury boutique. The kind of purchase that belonged in glossy magazines, not an accounting statement for the life we shared, both professional and personal. Curiosity mingled with unease. I pulled up Ben's calendar, which he had willingly shared when we merged finances. My heart sank as I aligned the dates. Dinner reservations, boutique visits, all meticulously timed. All coinciding with the night Ben had told me he was working late on a remote deal alone. The narrative he had sold himself, and me, for weeks crumbled under the weight of indisputable evidence. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. How had I missed the signs? The subtle absences, the hurried explanations, the cold, clipped tone he often used when speaking about his day. And Scarlett, with her dazzling presence and effortless charm, always present in Ben's stories, always lingering in his offhand mentions of meetings and client relations. It suddenly made sense. The unacknowledged tension, the delicate balancing act I had unknowingly performed just to keep peace in the apartment. I felt a hollow twist in my stomach. Anger? Yes. Betrayal? Absolutely. But beneath it all, there was something more insidious. Humiliation. This wasn't just infidelity. It was financial. Public. Documented in numbers I had access to. I had spent years building a life that I thought was shared, only to realize that my trust had been exploited, my own resources diverted to a narrative I had no part in. And yet, I didn't act immediately. I didn't pick up my phone or storm into his office. I sat there, still in the quiet hum of the empty restaurant, letting the reality settle. Numbers, after all, were objective. They didn't lie. They didn't apologize. They simply existed, cold and undeniable, waiting for me to interpret their truth. And the truth was staring me in the face. Ben had used me, my finances, my trust, my patience, to cover his indiscretions. I traced my finger along the line of the spreadsheet, following the money as if it were a map. Each figure was a marker, each date a signpost pointing toward the undeniable reality. The betrayal wasn't emotional, it was systemic, financial, concrete, and it demanded a response that matched its magnitude. Sleep refused me that night. I wandered through the empty dining room, touching tables and chairs as though their presence could anchor me. Each step reminded me of every late night, every sacrifice, every unspoken compromise I had made to build the restaurant we now shared. Or, I realized bitterly, the restaurant I had built largely for myself, and for him to profit from in more ways than one. By the time I returned to the office desk, I had made a quiet decision. This wouldn't be handled emotionally, with shouting or confrontation. That would be too easy, too messy, too public. No. This required precision, patience, and the kind of calculated action I had honed managing the chaos of a kitchen and the delicate art of running a successful restaurant. I closed the laptop with a soft click, but my mind was already racing, cataloging possibilities, envisioning outcomes, tracing each step I would need to reclaim the control that had been quietly, systematically taken from me. The misclassified expense was more than a mistake. It was the first window into a larger truth. And I would walk through it, armed with patience, strategy, and the quiet fury of someone who had been underestimated for far too long. That night, the restaurant was empty, but I was wide awake. And for the first time in months, I felt the faint pulse of determination settle in my chest, a promise that this betrayal, though deeply personal, would meet with equal force, carefully measured and devastatingly precise. Sleep had abandoned me. The images of the absurdly expensive shoes, the dinner reservations, the careful mapping of Ben's lies burned behind my eyelids. I couldn't stay idle. I needed clarity, evidence, and a truth so undeniable that it couldn't be brushed aside or minimized. The restaurant, my sanctuary of creativity and precision, had become a place of quiet calculation. I retreated to the small office at the back, a space filled with receipts, spreadsheets, and the faint scent of coffee and paper. It was here I would confront the digital layer of betrayal, the part Ben had assumed I would never see. I powered on the computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Our shared cloud storage was organized, compartmentalized with the precision only Ben could manage, but even the most meticulous systems had blind spots. A folder caught my attention. Newly created, password-protected, unlabeled. Its existence alone was suspicious. Ben had never hidden files from me before, and yet here it was, quietly waiting for discovery. I paused. This wasn't about prying. It was about protecting myself, my resources, the very life I had built alongside him. My instincts, honed over years of managing chaos in the kitchen and balancing the restaurant's finances, told me that if I didn't look, I would remain complicit in my own deception. Passwords appeared in my mind like pieces of a puzzle. A sudden thought struck me: Scarlett's birthday. Ben had always underestimated how obvious personal connections could be. With a quiet breath, I typed the numbers, heart hammering, hands trembling with anticipation and dread. The folder opened. Inside were photographs, carefully staged, perfectly lit, indisputable proof. Ben and Scarlett at the boutique, champagne flutes in hand, smiles too intimate to be professional. Nights he had claimed were devoted to remote deals, filled instead with indulgence and secrecy. Each image was a betrayal layer to top the last, a meticulously documented web of lies. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the icy clarity of inevitability. Then I found the voice note. Scarlett's laugh, dripping with condescension, filled the room. Head chef babysitting the bank account. The words struck with surgical precision, cutting through the mix of anger, disbelief, and humiliation coiling in my chest. I had imagined confrontation in various forms, arguments, tears, shouting, but nothing had prepared me for the mechanical cruelty of documentation, the way betrayal could be quantified, time-stamped, and preserved in perpetuity. I sat back, the chair creaking under the weight of my body and my emotions. My hands gripped the edges of the desk, nails digging into wood, not out of panic, but to anchor myself. My mind, usually so attuned to creating, cooking, and managing, shifted into strategy. This wasn't a moment for impulsive fury. This was a moment for precision. Each file I examined, each screenshot I reviewed, felt like adding a brick to the foundation of a plan. There would be no confrontation fueled by emotion. Ben's lies were not personal attacks to be yelled at. They were vulnerabilities to be exposed with unassailable evidence. I would reclaim control not by shouting, but by demonstrating the depth of the betrayal in a way that could not be ignored, debated, or excused. The images, meticulously labeled by date, were organized into a timeline. Receipts cross-checked against calendar entries, photo locations mapped to specific nights, voice notes sequenced to accompany the visual record. Each element served a purpose. I could feel the weight of power shifting from Ben's deceitful hands to my own capable ones. I closed the laptop for a moment, the screen dark, reflecting my face. The betrayal was real, the humiliation sharp. But beneath it all, there was clarity, and beneath the clarity, purpose. I was no longer the woman blindly trusting, blindly investing, blindly hoping. I was the woman who saw the truth, cataloged it, and prepared to act with deliberate, calculated precision. By the time I finally leaned back in my chair, exhaustion threatened to pull me into the night. But I felt no despair, only resolve. Betrayal had illuminated the weaknesses in Ben's carefully curated life, and I intended to turn that illumination into a plan so exact, so measured, that he would have no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. The digital confession wasn't just a revelation. It was a weapon, and I was ready to wield it. The days that followed were a study in restraint. I moved through the restaurant with the same precision and grace I had always cultivated, but now my attention was split between the subtle choreography of kitchen operations and the quiet mapping of Ben's patterns. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions that could be dismissed with charm or half-truths. I simply watched, cataloged, and waited. Ben, oblivious or perhaps arrogantly confident, continued his routine as if nothing had changed. Scarlett was ever present in the periphery, attending events, dinners, and casual lunches under the guise of client relations. But I had eyes sharper than any casual observer. I saw the pauses, the concealed messages, the calculated glances that spoke louder than words. Every late-night email, every sudden change in schedule, every unexplained expense was now a data point in my internal dossier. The restaurant became my laboratory. Each table I served, each dish I plated, was a mask of calm professionalism. I smiled for guests, laughed politely at compliments, and ensured every reservation and order ran smoothly. But underneath that practiced exterior, I was compiling evidence. Not just receipts and photos, but patterns, probabilities, and behaviors. I noted the timing of his business trips against the charges on the card, the hours of absence, the frequency of dinners coinciding with Scarlett's appearances. I began to notice the subtle ways he tried to maintain appearances around me. He would brush past, hands slightly trembling when he thought I wasn't watching, or speak with that clipped tone of superiority, convinced that financial power and charm could obscure moral failure. And yet, each small gesture, each minor deception, only added to the clarity of the portrait I was painting. It was exhausting in a way that no service rush or holiday dinner ever had been. Emotional vigilance demanded a different kind of stamina, one that sharpened rather than dulled the mind. I noticed things I had previously ignored. The way his laughter changed when Scarlett was nearby, the almost imperceptible tension in his posture when I entered a room, the subtle adjustments he made to schedules when I wasn't paying attention. I also observed myself. I noted how my stomach twisted in quiet fury, how my mind ran endless calculations on timing, evidence, and opportunity. But I also saw the strength building in me, the resilience that comes not from confrontation, but from preparation. I was no longer a woman blindly trusting her partner's words or intentions. I was a strategist, fully aware of the battlefield that had been laid before me, ready to act when the moment was right. To the outside world, I remained the same Clara, the dedicated restaurateur, the meticulous host, the woman who greeted guests with warmth and handled crises with calm efficiency. But internally, I was reorganizing my priorities, refining my strategy, and carefully preparing for the moment when private betrayal would meet public reckoning. The quiet observation also gave me time to reflect on myself, on what I wanted, and what I would no longer tolerate. Ben's manipulation, his arrogance, and his sense of entitlement were not just personal betrayals, they were lessons. They taught me the value of autonomy, the necessity of vigilance, and the importance of self-respect. Each note I made, each discrepancy I recorded, was not just a step toward exposing him, it was a step toward reclaiming the power that had been subtly stripped from me. By the end of the week, I had a mental map, so complete it was almost a living entity. I knew where the cracks in his narrative were, the exact moments when truth diverged from performance. I could see the culmination of all this quiet observation forming in my mind, a precise, unavoidable, public revelation that would strip the arrogance from his posture, expose the reality of his actions, and finally allow me to step out from the shadow of manipulation into my own light. And as I walked through the restaurant that evening, the smell of garlic and roasting vegetables filling my senses, I allowed a small, private smile. He had underestimated me, as men so often do. He had assumed I would remain passive, silent, and complicit. But I was neither passive nor silent. I was calculating, patient, and unyielding. The quiet observation had sharpened my resolve, and when the time came, the dish I would serve would be unforgettable, not just for him, but for me. The idea came to me quietly, almost innocuously, in the middle of an otherwise ordinary evening at the restaurant. I was arranging centerpieces for an upcoming charity gala, folding crisp linens and straightening silverware, when the thought crystallized. Why not use the very stage Ben thought would showcase his brilliance to display the truth? The gala would be perfect. All the right people, all the right lights, all the right audience. Ben and Scarlett would be present, utterly confident in their unearned triumph, entirely unaware that the spotlight would turn on them, not in applause, but in exposure. I felt a rush of clarity, the kind that comes only when strategy merges seamlessly with opportunity. This wasn't about shouting, about tearing someone down with words, or about unleashing a scene in public. That would be messy, potentially self-damaging. No, this was about precision, elegance, and undeniable proof. I would let the evidence speak, chronological and methodical, each frame building a narrative that could not be disputed. I began to work immediately, in the quiet hours after closing. My laptop became an instrument of justice. The photographs I had discovered, the boutique evenings, the champagne toasts, the intimate gestures, were organized with meticulous care. Receipts were cataloged, dates cross-checked against Ben's calendar entries, and the voice note from Scarlett became the final touch, a crescendo that would punctuate the presentation with sharp, undeniable clarity. The thrill of control surged through me. Betrayal had left its sting, yes, but it had also revealed the depth of my own resourcefulness. I was capable, organized, and deliberate in a way Ben had never imagined. The restaurant, once a shared project with him lurking in the background, was now entirely my domain. Every corner of it, every plate served, every table arranged, every menu printed, was under my command. And soon, the gala would reflect not just my skill as a restaurateur but my agency as a woman who refused to be humiliated in silence. I rehearsed the moment mentally, picturing Ben at the podium, the teleprompter in front of him, a crowd ready to celebrate. I envisioned the images sliding onto the screen behind him, dates, dinners, purchases, all clearly tracing the trajectory of his infidelity and deception. And then the voice note, the laughter. Scarlett's mocking words, broadcast across the hushed room. I felt a shiver of satisfaction. The elegance of it thrilled me more than any confrontation ever could. Even as I planned, I remained calm outwardly. To the staff bustling around me, I was the same Clara, focused, meticulous, quietly in control of the restaurant's pulse. But inwardly, I was constructing a narrative that Ben could not rewrite, a record of betrayal that would play out with perfect timing and devastating clarity. Every detail mattered: lighting, timing, sequence. I double-checked the slides, the audio, even the backups, ensuring no technical failure could undermine the plan. And yet, beneath the strategy, there was another layer: satisfaction. Not the petty joy of vengeance, but the deeper, more profound satisfaction of reclaiming my life and autonomy. For too long, I had allowed myself to be polite, restrained, deferential. For too long, I had excused his coldness and his selfishness. Now the plan was in my hands. I would take back the power that had been quietly siphoned from me, and I would do so with the elegance and precision that had always defined me. By the time the preparations were complete, I felt a strange mixture of calm and exhilaration. The seed of revenge had been planted, nurtured by months of observation, reflection, and silent determination. And it had grown into a strategy that would unfold like clockwork, leaving no room for denial, excuse, or manipulation. I looked around the restaurant, the soft glow of candlelight bouncing off polished silver, the aroma of roasting meats mingling with the faint scent of floral arrangements. This space, this environment, was my canvas, my stage, and soon it would bear witness to the truth. Not in anger, not in shame, but in quiet, undeniable justice. The seed had been planted, and soon it would bloom. The moment of exposure would arrive, and I would stand unwavering, watching the consequences of betrayal play out before a room full of witnesses. And for the first time in months, I felt fully, entirely in control. I didn't realize how much betrayal sharpens your awareness until I started gathering the pieces of my plan. Every detail around me felt heightened. The restaurant's hum, the clinking of glasses, the soft shuffle of servers preparing for the evening. It was all background noise to the quiet, precise calculation happening in my mind. I was building something deliberate, and it required patience, clarity, and restraint. The first step was gathering proof. Not just the dramatic kind, the photos and whispered recordings, but the boring, overlooked pieces that told the real story, timestamps, bank entries, business expenses that had no business being expensed. Ben had the arrogance of someone who believed he'd never be questioned. His digital footprints were a mess of carelessness, and as someone who had spent the last 3 years practically running the operations of the restaurant alone, I knew exactly where those footprints lived. In the dim light of my office, after the last staff member clocked out, I sifted through files, receipts, email confirmations. My desk slowly transformed into a battlefield map. Every document was a weapon. Every screenshot, a tiny crack in the facade Ben paraded around town. But gathering evidence was only half the battle. The other half was constructing the narrative with precision. I didn't want chaos. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth to unfold slowly, inevitably, like a curtain being pulled back on a stage. I created folders, digital and physical. Dinner dates. Unauthorized charges. Overlap timelines. Scarlett and Ben communications. Seeing everything organized like that gave me a strange sense of peace. It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was purpose. The voice note from Scarlett remained the centerpiece. Every time I played it, I felt the same cold sensation in my chest, not pain anymore, but resolve. Her smugness, her certainty, the way she spoke as if I were irrelevant, it all reminded me why silence was no longer an option. I moved on to the technical preparations. The charity gala would have a professional projector and a massive screen, one of the largest the hotel owned. The event coordinator, someone I'd known for years, trusted me completely. I told her I needed to review the equipment ahead of time, under the pretext of preparing a surprise presentation about the restaurant's contributions to the foundation. She didn't question it. She even handed me a spare USB with a smile. I tested everything late at night in the empty ballroom. The screen rose silently behind me, towering like a blank monument awaiting inscription. When the first image appeared, the date-stamped photo of Ben and Scarlett at the boutique, I felt a calmness settle over me. It was working. The files projected clearly, the transition smooth, the audio crisp. The ballroom felt enormous, its silence heavy. I stood there in the middle, arms crossed, watching my curated gallery of betrayal play across the screen like a documentary. Proof didn't lie. And I didn't have to embellish a single thing. The truth was already more than enough. Still, I needed a contingency. I wasn't naive enough to trust one USB stick. I created backups, 3, in fact. One on my private cloud, one hidden in the restaurant office, and one tucked discreetly inside the lining of my laptop case. I kept them labeled with neutral names: Gala menu draft, inventory slide deck, restoration project. Even if someone tried to stop me, the plan would continue. As the days passed, the arsenal grew, not just with evidence, but with confidence. My staff noticed I seemed more focused, though they assumed it was because the gala was approaching. I let them think that. It was easier than revealing the storm quietly forming beneath the surface. But something unexpected also happened during this time. I began rediscovering myself. The version of Clara before Ben's criticisms and quiet dismissals. The version who believed in her capabilities, her instincts, her value. With every screenshot saved, every sequence perfected, that older version of me resurfaced a little more. This wasn't just about exposing him anymore. It was about reclaiming the space he had gradually occupied in my mind, the one he had filled with doubt and second-guessing. Meticulous planning became a kind of therapy. Structure became strength. And the closer the gala approached, the more certain I became. This wasn't revenge for the sake of pettiness. It was justice for the sake of closure. By the time I finished assembling everything, I had a complete arsenal, organized, undeniable, and perfectly timed. And with it came something I hadn't felt in a long time: power. I wasn't afraid of the moment anymore. I was prepared for it. The morning of the gala arrived with a quiet intensity. The city hummed below me as I drove, sunlight glinting off the pavement, yet my mind was already inside the restaurant and the grand ballroom. For once, I didn't feel the usual buzz of pre-service nerves. This was different. The adrenaline that once pushed me through the chaos of the kitchen was now steady, focused, a laser guiding every thought. Today, I would see months of careful observation, planning, and strategy come to life. I arrived early, slipping past the hotel staff who were still setting up tables, arranging centerpieces, and testing microphones. Their movements were calm, unaware of the storm quietly assembling behind the scenes. I moved through the space silently, reviewing each slide on the projector one more time. Dates, times, photos, audio clips, everything was in place, each element sequenced for maximum clarity and undeniable impact. There was no chaos in my preparation. Chaos belonged to Ben, and soon, he would be confronted with the truth. As I stood near the screen, watching the blank expanse ready to carry my evidence to life, I felt a strange serenity settle over me. It wasn't triumph yet, but it was the calm before action. The kind of calm that comes when a plan is flawless, when timing is perfect, and when patience has finally paid off. I ran through the sequence silently in my head. Photo of the boutique, followed by the champagne dinner, receipts cross-referenced, culminating in Scarlett's mocking voice note. I could almost see the collective gasp of realization echoing through the room. Ben arrived mid-morning, dressed in a sharply tailored suit that made him look untouchable, as if the universe itself had chosen him to be untouchable. I watched from a distance as he smiled at guests, shook hands, and spoke with authority. He had no idea. Not a single hint had slipped from me. My calm demeanor, my usual warmth toward clients, my strategic avoidance of conflict, all contributed to a sense of security. And that confidence would be the very thing that made the reveal so devastating. I wandered through the preparation areas, checking details in a detached, methodical way. Lighting, audio, seating arrangements, everything was precise, controlled. I made mental notes of the flow. Ben would take the stage first, confident, ready to bask in the admiration of colleagues, investors, and friends. And I would wait, patiently, silent, observant. The room would be full, every eye ready to celebrate, unaware that what they were about to see was far from celebratory. Even as I refined the details, I felt a subtle shift within myself. The betrayal, the humiliation, the frustration, they no longer had power over me. That power had shifted months ago when I first discovered the misclassified expense, and it had grown with each piece of evidence, each careful calculation. By now, I was calm because I knew that justice would be delivered with elegance, not rage. The slow, deliberate method of my strategy made the eventual outcome far more satisfying than any impulsive confrontation ever could. And then, unexpectedly, I noticed a small, personal revelation unfolding in the quiet of preparation. The meticulousness, the focus, and the confidence I had regained were not just tools for revenge. They were a rediscovery of myself. The Clara who had been quietly eroded by doubt, by compromise, by Ben's careless arrogance, was returning. The woman who trusted her instincts, who valued her intelligence and capability, was rising with each calculated step I took. I allowed myself a small, private smile as I reviewed the slides one final time. This wasn't about humiliation for its own sake. It was about reclaiming my life, my resources, and my dignity. Ben had assumed he could manipulate, mislead, and take for granted my silence. He had assumed I would continue to be polite, patient, and forgiving. He was wrong. By the time the first guests began to arrive, the ballroom had an air of anticipation and sophistication. Everything was perfect. Every detail, from the soft music to the subtle scent of flowers, reflected calm elegance. I blended seamlessly with the environment, a gracious host, quietly aware that the evening was no longer about charity or appearances. It was about truth. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of preparation settle into the serenity of execution. The calm before the storm was complete. And when the moment arrived, every piece would fall into place, leaving no room for argument, excuse, or denial. Today, I would reclaim everything Ben had taken, not with anger, but with undeniable, elegant precision. And as the clock ticked toward the evening's first toast, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: nothing would ever be the same again. The moment arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly. Ben stepped onto the stage, all charm and confidence, expecting the applause and admiration that had been his currency for far too long. I watched from the edge of the room, hands folded calmly, a faint smile tugging at the corners of my lips. This was no longer about anger. It was about precision, control, and the undeniable power of truth. He began his speech, speaking in that smooth, rehearsed cadence that always made me feel small, even when I had done most of the work behind the scenes. I could hear the polite murmurs of guests, the soft clinking of glasses, and the subtle shuffle of people settling in their seats. It was the perfect moment, and I waited, patiently. With a final mental check of the slides and audio, I pressed the remote. The projector sprang to life, and the first image filled the massive screen behind Ben. A crisp, time-stamped photograph of him and Scarlett at the boutique appeared. He froze, mid-sentence, eyes widening in disbelief. The room, initially oblivious, began to shift. Guests leaned forward, curious, sensing the sudden tension. I didn't need to speak. The images did all the work. Each slide followed chronologically: the champagne dinners, the expensive purchases, the moments that betrayed trust and misrepresented intention. I had arranged the visuals with care, labeling dates and locations clearly, so the story unfolded logically, leaving no room for excuse. Each frame was a sentence in the narrative, a fact laid bare for everyone in the room to see. Ben tried to recover, fumbling with the microphone, his smooth facade cracking as the next slide appeared. And then came the crescendo, the voice note. Scarlett's mocking tone filled the room, dripping with disdain. Head chef babysitting the bank account. Silence fell, thick and heavy, like a physical presence. The guests' eyes darted between the screen and him, disbelief mingled with subtle admiration for the precision of what they were witnessing. I felt a strange calm as I watched him falter. There was no shouting, no chaos, only clarity. Every carefully documented betrayal, every calculated deception, every misrepresented expense had been laid bare. The room itself seemed to pulse with the weight of truth. Ben's attempts to explain, to redirect, to charm, fell flat. Words that might have once commanded respect were now hollow, meaningless against the concrete timeline of evidence. I saw the shift in the eyes of investors, colleagues, and friends, recognition that the carefully constructed image of success had cracks far too deep to ignore. I felt no triumph in humiliation alone. Instead, I felt reclamation. Every element of the plan had been executed as intended. The power Ben thought he held, over me, over the finances, over appearances, was now reversed. I had orchestrated it with quiet determination, without spectacle, without unnecessary drama, allowing the evidence itself to speak. The evening continued around him, the gala resuming its rhythm. But for Ben, the world had shifted. I could see it in his posture, the way his hands trembled slightly, the faint flush of heat rising in his neck as whispers spread through the room. I walked among the guests, engaging politely, seamlessly blending control with social grace. It was intoxicating to move freely while he floundered under the weight of his exposure. I thought briefly of Scarlett. Her smugness, so audible in that voice note, was now a memory that burned quietly. I had transformed it into my strength, a reminder of the depth of deception I had endured and the precision of the strategy one had built. By the end of the night, Ben had no choice but to leave early, his reputation tarnished, his influence diminished. I remained, overseeing the gala, ensuring every guest felt welcomed, every detail flawless. I felt light, unburdened, and entirely in control, a stark contrast to the helplessness I had once felt in private moments. As the last guest departed, I lingered in the empty ballroom, watching the projector dim. The images, once instruments of exposure, now served as markers of my reclamation. This was no longer about vengeance, it was about rebirth. I had taken what was mine, not with chaos or anger, but with clarity, precision, and dignity. And as I stepped into the quiet night, leaving behind the echoes of the gala, I realized something profound. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I was free. Free from deception. Free from humiliation. Free to rebuild, to flourish, and to reclaim the life I had earned. The reveal was complete. And in that completion, I discovered the first true taste of liberation. The morning after the gala, the city felt quieter, somehow lighter. I walked into the restaurant early, savoring the calm before the day's usual chaos. The tables gleamed under the soft morning light, the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with the faint aroma of brewed coffee. Everything was exactly as it should be, my space, my rules, my sanctuary. For the first time in months, I felt fully, entirely in control of my own life. Ben's departure had left a void, yes, but it was a void I welcomed. It was a space that could now be filled with my vision, my ambition, and my freedom. The restaurant was no longer just a business. It was a testament to resilience, intelligence, and quiet power. Every corner, every dish, every detail bore my imprint, and for the first time, that imprint felt absolute. I moved through the kitchen, checking on the staff with ease. They had sensed the shift already. My calm confidence, my unwavering clarity, my focus on precision rather than chaos. They worked seamlessly, trusting my leadership implicitly. And I trusted myself, something I hadn't done for months. Every task, from plating to scheduling, felt purposeful. Every decision reinforced the sense of control I had regained. Even as I supervised, my mind wandered back to the gala, to the moment the projector revealed the truth. The way Ben had faltered, the collective realization of his betrayal, the undeniable clarity of the evidence, it all replayed in my mind like a quiet affirmation. I had executed the plan without spectacle, without anger, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. And in doing so, I had reclaimed not just the restaurant, but my dignity, my agency, and my future. There was also a subtle, unexpected joy in the freedom itself. I realized I had spent so much time managing fear, suspicion, and betrayal that I had forgotten the simple pleasure of being able to act without constraint. Now every choice was mine, every moment mine to shape. I could rebuild, expand, and explore opportunities that had once seemed impossible under the shadow of Ben's control. Financially, the reclamation was complete as well. With Ben's interference removed and the business fully under my direction, I had the latitude to make strategic decisions without compromise. Investments could be focused on growth, innovation, and quality rather than appeasing someone else's ego. I could hire new talent, refine the menu, and explore collaborations, all with the assurance that my vision would remain untainted. And yet, amidst all this professional triumph, there was a personal reclamation that felt even more profound. I had rediscovered the version of myself that had been overshadowed by doubt, compromise, and betrayal. The Clara who trusted her instincts, valued her intellect, and commanded respect had returned, not angrily, but quietly, powerfully, with a sense of purpose that demanded acknowledgement. I allowed myself a small smile as I walked to the office, reviewing upcoming plans and projects. The restaurant was thriving, yes, but more importantly, I was thriving. Every detail, every decision, every choice reinforced my autonomy. I no longer felt tethered to someone else's mistakes or misdeeds. I was unshackled, unburdened, and unapologetically myself. By afternoon, the restaurant was bustling with energy. Patrons arrived, unaware of the recent drama, yet the vibrancy of the space reflected the confidence that now radiated from me. I moved among the tables, offering greetings and small conversation, my presence calm and commanding. The staff mirrored my focus and composure, creating an environment of efficiency, warmth, and excellence. As the day drew to a close, I paused for a moment, leaning against the counter, taking in the space I had built with my own hands, my own decisions, my own vision. Every betrayal, every slight, every moment of doubt had led me here. And I understood something essential. The true power wasn't in revenge or exposure. The true power was in reclaiming yourself, rebuilding your life with intention, and moving forward with unwavering clarity. I took a deep breath, feeling a profound sense of liberation settle over me. The restaurant, once a source of tension and compromise, was now a reflection of my strength, resilience, and autonomy. I had turned betrayal into empowerment, humiliation into reclamation, and loss into opportunity. And in that quiet, private moment, I realized the most powerful truth. I was no longer defined by what others had done to me. I was defined by what I had chosen to create, protect, and nurture. I was free, and in that freedom, I found a strength and confidence that would carry me forward into every chapter yet unwritten. The reclamation was complete. I had survived betrayal, exposed deception, and risen stronger than before. And as the evening light faded across the polished floors, I smiled, knowing the future was entirely, brilliantly mine.